Get ready to dive into the darkest side of nature with 100 Men vs. 1 Gorilla Horror Stories, a video that will test your courage and challenge any idea you have about strength, survival, and the primal instincts of animals. Today, we will explore the hypothetical debate that went viral on the internet. Could 100 unarmed men defeat a single silverback gorilla? But instead of theories, we will rely on real encounters, historical accounts, and terrifying experiences that show reality is far scarier than any meme or online discussion. You will hear stories of Ugandan hunters who came face to face with powerful gorillas, volunteers in Central African forests coerced by illegal hunters to confront these creatures, and incidents in zoos where the strength of a gorilla almost destroyed human lives in seconds, leaving physical and psychological scars that last forever. Each story reveals the immeasurable strength, unpredictable aggression, and lethal intelligence of a single gorilla, showing that numbers do not guarantee safety, and that underestimating these animals can have devastating consequences. Some of the most controversial parts involve accounts of brutal mutilations, illegal exploitation for gorilla meat trade, and confrontations that ended with humans seriously injured or even dead, reminding us that terror does not always come from imagination, but from cruel reality. If you enjoy stories that mix suspense, real danger, and true horror, this video is for you. And I ask you to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, because your subscription helps YouTube share these stories with more people who love horror and suspense, ensuring that we can continue bringing shocking, mysterious, and unforgettable accounts. I must admit that what surprised me the most was the ability of a single gorilla to cause destruction in seconds, defying any human logic and showing that nature still dominates this planet in ways we can barely comprehend. Stay with me until the end of the video because the final revelation will leave you stunned and reconsidering everything you thought you knew about strength, courage, and survival in the face of a true jungle monster. The video dives into one of the darkest and most unsettling debates on the internet. Could 100 unarmed men defeat a single silverback gorilla? At first, the idea may seem absurd, almost a harmless curiosity, but as we explore real stories of encounters with gorillas, the tension and terror become palpable. The narrative takes us to remote villages in Uganda, where men are trained from a young age to hunt and protect their communities, aware that the forest hides predators capable of ending lives in seconds. A young hunter describes his first solo experience, where the fear of failure and the terror of becoming food for a powerful creature intertwine into a suffocating sensation. When confronted with a silverback gorilla, he feels the animal's brutal power, its strength that seems to defy any human logic, and survives only by hiding until the threat moves away. But the horror does not end there. His best friend, ignoring the warnings, faces the same creature and is torn apart before his eyes, a mutilated body that terrifyingly illustrates how devastating a single gorilla can be. The video also revisits historical incidents, such as the 1910 case when a man named Uganda was attacked and killed by a gorilla while cutting bamboo, his body found without a head, reinforcing the reality that these creatures possess strength and ferocity beyond human comprehension. In another account, a volunteer in the Democratic Republic of the Congo witnesses poachers using humans as bait to obtain gorilla meat, revealing not only the brutality of men, but also the lethal impressiveness of the animal, whose mere presence commands fear and respect. Finally, the experience of a former zookeeper demonstrates that even gorillas raised in captivity can become agents of destruction in seconds, attacking and nearly killing a colleague when he disregards the animal's boundaries. Throughout all these narratives, the video builds a tense and terrifying atmosphere, showing that the strength, intelligence, and instinct of a silverback gorilla can easily overpower multiple unarmed humans. The hypothetical debate, which seemed like just an internet curiosity, transforms into a frightening reflection on human vulnerability in the face of the wild, reminding us that when confronted with real predators, logic and bravery are often insufficient to ensure survival. Each story reinforces the idea that underestimating a gorilla is stepping into a nightmare, where the outcome of the encounter is brutal, swift, and relentless. And without weapons, preparation, or respect, humans simply stand no chance. A man from a remote village in Uganda reveals a story of fear, courage, and survival that seems straight out of a nightmare. Since childhood, he was trained to hunt and, if necessary, to protect his community, learning that every step in the forest was a calculated risk between life and death. The sound of branches breaking under invisible paws, the rustling of leaves like whispers of predators, and the penetrating scent of the forest are constant reminders that deadly animals are always lurking. Among them, gorillas stand out as brutal and intelligent forces, capable of destroying any unsuspecting human in seconds. The young hunter confesses his terror in facing these powerful creatures, describing the feeling of paralysis when approaching areas known to harbor gorillas and the suffocating tension of every moment spent in the shadow of such a colossal threat. When he is finally initiated as a solo hunter, he is forced to leave the safety of the experienced, carrying not only the responsibility of providing food for his people, but also the overwhelming weight of the fear that he may never return. Every movement in the forest seems to conceal a predator. Every strange sound is interpreted as an omen of death. When he finally comes face to face with a silverback gorilla, the colossal creature embodying the primal force of nature, his heart races and his instincts scream to flee, but absolute respect for the animal and awareness of his own vulnerability force him to remain still, hidden, observing every gesture of the giant. The experience is etched in his mind as an endless sequence of terror and reverence. The heavy sound of the gorilla's steps, the sway of its enormous arms, the realization that any mistake could mean an instant and brutal death. Returning to the village, he carries not only the tension of having faced death head-on, but also the haunting reminder that in the forest, man is small, fragile, and easily crushed by the untamed power of nature. Every detail, every sensation lingers as a persistent echo of the terror he endured, reminding that the wild world shows no mercy and that human courage, no matter how trained, is often insufficient in the face of the absolute power of animals like silverback gorillas. During his first solo hunt, the young hunter from Uganda faces one of the most terrifying moments of his life, a brutal test of his courage and the relentless power of nature. He enters the forest alone, each step accompanied by oppressive silence and the unsettling rustle of leaves, fully aware that deadly predators could be lurking at any moment. Fear intensifies as he approaches a clearing, and there he comes face to face with the massive silverback gorilla, a presence radiating power, ferocity, and lethal intelligence. His heart races, muscles freeze, and his mind screams to flee, but the weight of tradition and responsibility forces him to remain vigilant, every second an eternity of pure tension. The creature advances, its overwhelming physical strength and unpredictable movements turning the situation into an almost tangible nightmare, and he is forced to hide, stumbling and losing his spear in the process, and while the gorilla watches and moves with a mix of curiosity and threat. The sense of helplessness is crushing. A fragile human life confronted with a being capable of destroying everything in seconds, while the sound of breaking branches and shifting leaves echoes like a death sentence. When he finally manages to escape, wounded in his dignity and without his hunting equipment, returning to the village brings no relief, only a mixture of lingering fear and deep shame. The elders, hoping for food, look at him with disapproval, judging him for returning empty-handed, and the young hunter feels the overwhelming weight of humiliation, knowing he has failed not only physically, but also in what defines his value to his community. Every step back is filled with memories of the proximity to death, the terrifying power of the gorilla, and the certainty that the forest is a place where humans, even trained, can be crushed, overpowered, and humiliated in moments, making each memory of this solo hunt a constant echo of terror, vulnerability, and absolute respect for the untamed wildness of natural life. The terror did not end with the young hunter's escape. It had only just begun. His best friend, determined to prove his courage and restore the honor the village believed had been tarnished, decided to face the same forest, the same path, the same fate. The sun had not even fully set when he set out, confident he would return with a worthy prey, unaware that he was walking straight into the jaws of death. Hours passed, as the sky darkened, and the village began to feel the weight of his absence. The night's silence was broken only by the wind rustling through the trees until unease turned into true fear. At dawn, the young hunter, consumed by guilt and despair, decided to follow his friend's tracks, retracing every step along the cursed path. The forest seemed different, denser, more hostile, as if the very air were tainted with something sinister. When he reached the clearing where he had encountered the gorilla days before, horror paralyzed him. His friend's body lay there, or what remained of it, torn apart in an indescribable way. Arms ripped off, head separated from the body, dried blood scattered among the leaves. A scene of pure brutality beyond human comprehension. No ordinary animal could have done this. The ground was upturned, the marks of inhuman strength evident, as if the earth itself had been ripped apart. Confronted with this sight, the hunter felt his stomach churn and his soul plunge into an abyss of guilt. He realized his friend had died trying to prove something that should never have been challenged: the absolute power of a silverback gorilla. The scene was so violent that time seemed to stop. The air grew heavy, and the entire forest appeared to watch in silence, as if nature itself were warning man never to cross its limits again. From that day on, the young hunter lived haunted by the images of the massacre, seeing his friend's face in nightmares, hearing the imagined sound of bones breaking, smelling the metallic scent of blood mixed with damp earth. He carried forever the memory that the strength of a single gorilla is not only physical, but an ancestral, wild, almost mystical force. A force that cannot be challenged without paying a price. The horror of that morning became a psychological scar, a living reminder that the jungle does not forgive arrogance, and that death in the hands of a gorilla is swift, merciless, and devastatingly human. In 1910, long before cameras, records, or soundtracks turned fear into spectacle, a man named Uganda met his end in the silent depths of the forest, in an episode so brutal that it passed through generations as a legend of blood and terror. He was a lumberjack, known for his courage and strength, accustomed to cutting bamboo on steep slopes, where the vegetation seemed to swallow the very light. That day, the sun had barely risen when he entered the damp woodland, his axe resting on his shoulder, the metallic sound echoing like an omen. The air was heavy, dense, and each strike against the bamboo seemed to awaken something in the shadows. Unbeknownst to him, Uganda had entered the territory of a silverback gorilla, a monster of muscle and fury, the silent guardian of a jungle that does not forgive intruders. The first sign was the sound, a deep, almost human roar vibrating through the air like distant thunder. Birds vanished, the wind stopped, and the silence that followed was more threatening than any scream. When the gorilla appeared, immense, its dark eyes reflecting something deeper than hatred, perhaps judgment, Uganda froze. There was no time to run. The attack was swift, precise, devastating. The gorilla advanced with a speed impossible for a creature of its size, the ground trembling under the weight of each step. The axe flew from the man's hands, useless against the overwhelming force that struck him. Bones snapped like dry branches, his body was thrown against the trees, and his screams were swallowed by the forest. When the body was finally found days later, it was unrecognizable. Limbs shattered, chest crushed, face destroyed. The scene was so violent that the elders forbade speaking of it at night, believing the gorilla's spirit still roamed, guarding the territory that had been desecrated. Uganda's death became more than a warning. It turned into a curse, a story murmured around fires and in whispers, reminding everyone that the forest has its own laws and that challenging a silverback gorilla is the same as challenging death itself. To this day, they say that those who cut bamboo in that region hear, in the distance, the dry snap of breaking bones and the deep roar echoing through the trees. The eternal reminder that the power of nature cannot be measured, only feared. On a sweltering afternoon in the heart of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, a dark story was born amidst fear and human brutality. A foreign volunteer who had joined a local group to help with wildlife preservation found himself dragged into a nightmare as real as the suffocating heat of the forest. The group he worked with was intercepted by illegal hunters, soulless men driven by hunger, greed, and the cruel instinct to dominate nature. They surrounded him, armed with machetes and rusted rifles, and amidst nervous laughter and wild glances gave him an impossible order: Approach a silverback gorilla resting ahead. Go, bring the meat, they said, pushing him with the butt of a rifle, their voices sounding like an inescapable judgment. The volunteer hesitated, sweat streaming down his face, his heart pounding so loudly it felt as if the forest itself could hear it. Every step toward the gorilla was a sentence, and the air seemed denser, heavier, as if the entire world held its breath. The gorilla was there, enormous, silent, motionless like a living mountain. Its black eyes reflected an intelligence beyond human comprehension, a mix of calm and threat, majesty and death. The hunters behind him watched impatiently, ready to kill both man and animal if anything went out of control. When the volunteer took another step, the silverback rose. The sound of its chest being struck with force echoed like thunder, and in that instant, time seemed to stop. The gorilla lunged. Fast, brutal, with a primal energy the man would never forget. The volunteer fell to his knees, feeling the rush of the blow passing just inches from his head, the strong scent of earth and fear mingling with the hot breath of the beast. The hunters opened fire, and the sound of gunshots blended with screams breaking branches and the deafening roar of the wounded animal. When it was over, only the gorilla's bloodied body remained, and the volunteer, trembling, covered in mud and tears, stared at what was left of what had once been a magnificent creature. The silence that followed was sepulchral. Neither the hunters laughed, nor did the birds return to sing. In that moment, he understood something terrible, that human cruelty was as deadly as the strength of the gorilla, and that the jungle no longer belonged to those who lived in it, but to those who destroyed it for pleasure. Since then, they say the volunteer never spoke of the incident again. His gaze remained distant, as if somewhere inside he still heard the sound of the gorilla's chest being struck, calling the forest to witness the death of a king. The illegal hunting incident exposes a dark and disturbing side of human nature, where greed and perversity combine to exploit creatures that should be protected. The forests of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, already haunted by natural predators, become the stage for a secret and cruel trade. Gorilla meat destined for a luxury market, sold at exorbitant prices to those who view the consumption of wild animals as a symbol of status and power. Each gorilla killed represents not only the death of a majestic and intelligent creature, but also the destruction of centuries of ecological and cultural balance. The violence is not limited to the animal. It involves humans as well, like the volunteer forced to approach the silverback, turning fear into an instrument of control and survival, demonstrating that the most dangerous predator is not always the one with sharp fangs, but the one who acts with impunity and cruelty. The illegality of this practice is blatant, but the threat is invisible. Trails of blood mingle with the forest mud, cameras watch silently, and urban markets, full of wealth and desire, continue to demand the deaf beings who could never defend themselves against such schemes. This macabre trade transforms wildlife into commodities, where each gorilla killed is a statistic of greed and disrespect, a terrifying reminder that true terror often does not come from the animal's physical strength, but from the cruel manipulation of humans who believe they are above morality and the law. The forest, a silent witness to massacres and illegal transactions, holds the echoes of lost lives, and for those who venture into its shadows, the lesson is clear. Human exploitation can be more devastating than any natural predator, and each ruthless choice leaves scars that nature will never forget. This episode serves as a grim and ongoing reminder that violence against wildlife is a force as destructive as the savagery of the animals themselves, and that human greed can turn majestic silverback gorillas into victims of a terror that is not natural, but entirely invented by man. A former zookeeper shares an account that feels more like a real-time horror movie, where the line between fascination and death dissolves in seconds. He worked closely with captive gorillas, creatures that, although seemingly domesticated, carry within them the brute strength and primal instincts that humanity could never fully control. A colleague, obsessed with the animals, decided to ignore all safety rules and jumped into the gorilla enclosure, believing he could interact with them without danger, as if familiarity could tame nature. The former zookeeper, horrified, shouted a warning, but it was too late. The largest gorilla in the zoo emerged like a living shadow, its massive muscles tensed, eyes fixed like blades of warning. In an instant, the colleague was slammed to the ground with inhuman force, thrown, crushed, and struck repeatedly like a rag doll in the hands of an unstoppable giant. Screams echoed through the enclosure, mixed with the deep roar of the beast and the chaos of desperate attempts to intervene. No glass barrier, no locked door could save a human life against such concentrated strength. When the team finally managed to immobilize the gorilla with tranquilizer darts, only a bloodied and broken human body remained. Bones shattered, irreversibly injured, yet miraculously still alive. The experience left an indelible mark on the former zookeeper. The terror of witnessing the speed, strength, and lethal precision of a gorilla in a real attack, and the awareness that even in captivity, these creatures remain entities of absolute power, capable of turning a moment of carelessness into a nightmare with no return. The memory of the incident haunts him, every detail of the attack etched as if carved into his mind. From the gorilla's gaze to the overwhelming sensation of applied force, showing that proximity to these animals is never safe, and that human arrogance in the face of nature can result in pure terror and near-fatal consequences. It is a grim warning. No matter how domesticated they may seem, gorillas carry in every muscle and gesture the memory of their wildness, and underestimating them opens the door to chaos, pain, and the most primal fear. All of these incidents combined paint a terrifying picture of reality. Even when surrounded by dozens or even hundreds of humans, a silverback gorilla remains an almost unstoppable force. Its physical strength is colossal, capable of crushing bones and hurling bodies as if they were mere objects, while its aggression and primal instincts turn any approach into a deadly game. Each account, from the Ugandan hunter who nearly met his death to his friend who was torn apart, historical attacks like the one in 1910, and the horrors witnessed by volunteers and zookeepers, demonstrates that human numerical superiority does not guarantee safety. The gorilla does not act predictably. Its sharp intelligence allows it to assess threats, react with lethal precision, and exploit any vulnerability. The forest, captivity, or any invaded territory become stages of extreme tension, where seconds decide between life and death. Even in the presence of weapons, the animal's instinct and physical brutality represent a constant threat, reminding us that it is not just raw strength, but also the unpredictability of a predator that makes the confrontation terrifying. These events show that underestimating nature is a fatal mistake. The savagery of a gorilla cannot be measured, tamed, or easily controlled, and each story serves as a grim warning that human survival depends on absolute respect, prudent distance, and the acknowledgement that, in the face of the power of a single gorilla, even multiple men can become fragile and vulnerable in seconds, turning any encounter into a tangible nightmare, where death is swift, silent, and inevitable for those who ignore the limits of nature. Although firearms may tip the balance in favor of humans, in any unarmed scenario, the reality is clear and terrifying. A single silverback gorilla with its colossal strength, sharp instincts, and lethal unpredictability could easily dominate dozens or even hundreds of people. Every story presented, from Ugandan hunters confronting the forest to volunteers coerced by poachers and zookeepers witnessing brutal attacks, reinforces this undeniable truth. The gorilla's physical power is unmatched. Its speed and aggression turn any approach into an immediate risk, and its instinctive judgment of danger makes it a deadly opponent. The video emphasizes that underestimating these creatures is a fatal mistake, that human survival depends on distance, respect, and a deep understanding of their behavior, and that even in captivity or situations of apparent control, the savagery of these animals never fully disappears. The gorilla is not just an animal, it is a living symbol of nature's primal force, reminding us that human arrogance in the face of wildlife can have devastating consequences. The final message is clear. More than any hypothetical debate, the true lesson lies in recognizing the power and majesty of these creatures, the necessity of protecting their existence, and the imperative to never recklessly challenge a being whose combined strength and intelligence make it one of the most impressive and dangerous predators on the planet. And thus we reach the end of 100 Men vs. 1 Gorilla horror stories. If you felt that chill down your spine and realized, even for a moment, just how terrifying and powerful a single gorilla can be, then you already know that reality often surpasses any hypothetical debate. But before you go, don't forget to leave a like because it helps YouTube show this video to more people who love horror and mystery stories just like you. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any dark and shocking content to come. Every subscription makes a huge difference in keeping this channel active and bringing real stories you won't find anywhere else. If you can support even more, consider sending a super thanks. Every contribution directly helps create bigger, better, and scarier videos. And if you can't, don't worry, but leave a comment telling us what shocked you the most in this video. We love reading every reaction and knowing which story left you breathless. And don't leave just yet. Another video is appearing on the screen that you need to watch. It's even more engaging, intense, and captivating than this one, and promises to take you on an even deeper dive into real terror. Click now and continue this journey into the darkest side of reality.